In your lifetime, you've witnessed and you've been a part of a technology revolution. You've seen the advent of smartphones, of things like iPads, of wireless internet all around the United States and around the world as well. And that has led to a number of changes and a number of reforms within that revolution. The same thing happened in a historical standpoint, especially during the Industrial Revolution. And we're going to be exploring the question of how did the Industrial Revolution lead to reform? Let's get started with this lesson, scholars. Our main lesson goal today is to learn how industrialization led to reform. In order to achieve that goal together, scholars, we first want to describe ways reformers tried to improve working conditions. Secondly, we want to explain how industrialization led to democratic reforms. But also to help us succeed at these goals, we need to make sure we understand and be on the lookout for these words to know. Your academic words are compulsory and reform. The rest are your domain or lesson-specific words, and those are abolition, collective bargaining, strike, and suffrage. At any time, you can look up these words in your glossary, and that'll be a great resource for you to use. But like I said, make sure you keep your eyes open as we go through this lesson together for these words, scholars. Take a look at that lesson question, scholars. It's always at the top of the screen. It says, how did the Industrial Revolution lead to reform? In order to succeed at answering that question, we're first going to look at reform movements of the 1800s. And we're going to look at labor reform, and we're also going to look at democratic reforms. But before we start any of that, I want to take you to a story behind the label. When the Industrial Revolution took place in England and the United States, as well as the rest of Europe, there were a number of challenges, especially dealing with child labor. And many countries today are going through their own version of industrialization. Do you think those problems, those challenges still exist? Well, think about those things when we talk about the story of the label. Next time you go into your closet or you're wearing some clothes, take a look at the label. Many times it will say exactly where it's from. Sometimes Pakistan, sometimes India, Bangladesh, many different countries. So think about, where was it made? Who made this article of clothing? How much did the worker earn making it? Was it cents in their currency or was it dollars in their currency? What were the working conditions like? Also, and maybe most importantly, was it possible the worker was a child? Keep these things in mind as you look through your own closet and try to make a modern day connection to today's lesson. Back to our lesson question, scholars, always at the top of the screen. How did the Industrial Revolution lead to reform? We just talked about the story behind the label and how other countries are going through their own Industrial Revolution. Now we're really going to start answering this question in this first part, where we're talk about the reform movements of the 1800s. Let's get started with this first part, scholars. As the 1800s progressed, the demands for reform or changes increased, especially in these urbanized, industrialized cities, because conditions in factories were dangerous. Laborers were working up to 16 hours a day, many times 6 days a week. And children, as young as 5, were working instead of going to school. Also, the wages were very low. You can see some of the conditions in this photo, and we're going to take a deeper look at this photo in a second. But before we really dive into this photo, we need to understand how to analyze a photograph, because you can really pull a lot of meaning and a lot of details out of a single photograph if you know how to analyze it. First, you need to make an overall impression. What is your overall impression of the photograph? How does it make you feel looking at it? Do you have any further questions? This should take you about a minute or a minute and a half of just looking at that photograph and looking at various things. Secondly, you want to break it down into different quadrants. You want to look for certain things like people, objects, or activities. And you want to list these important things and pull your observations of those various areas. Then you also, using those, you want to be able to answer some questions. For example, what can you infer is the purpose of the photograph? You may be able to pull that from who took the photograph. Who was that person working for? Those are all really good things to find out, especially when you're looking at photographs. Also, what conclusions can you draw from looking at that photograph? And this right here, under conclusions, you can use your background knowledge that you already know about the Industrial Revolution. Now keep this in mind, and I'm going to help you out as we break down and analyze that photograph we saw earlier. First of all, you just want to look at it. You know, taking a look at, wow, look at where it could be, how many people are in there, sort of a broad look at it. You're not looking at specific things yet. How's it making me feel? I'm kind of cramped looking at that. If I'm one of these, if this is me right here, I'd be feeling pretty cramped. I mean, there aren't any windows around. It's very, very dark. There are all these machines in the background, things like that. Then, after you do a broad overlook of it, then you want to break it down. First, let's look at the people. Notice the people. You have, right now, I see two young boys right here, and they look definitely maybe younger than 15, and I'm thinking, why are they in a factory that should be worked by grown-ups? Also, you see other people in the background, right there. So you can see these people, and when you're looking at the people, you can really begin to see some things about them. Notice how they're in a factory, but look at their hands. I don't see any work gloves. They're around heavy machinery, and they're just wearing something that looks almost like a ball cap. They're not wearing hard hats. That's pretty dangerous work to not have any protection on at all. Also notice the clothing. It's ripped, it's tattered, it's torn, it's worn out. These aren't new clothing. Also, you can see some of it looks pretty dirty, like it has some dust or some soot on the clothing as well. Next, take a look at the objects. You can notice it's in a factory. You can see a kiln or a chimney right there. You see various pipes here. You can see he's working with some sort of tongs, and there seems to be something right here that he's about to pick up. There's also these large tubes here. So those are some of the objects that you can look at. Finally, what about activities? Looked at people, looked at objects, the activities. Now, the background information on this is that this is a glass factory in Indiana. And so they're making glass. So think, to make glass, you need a furnace. It's extremely hot. But what do you notice about it? If it's hot, you would want probably some fresh air. Notice, there's no fresh air. There aren't any windows to bring it in, so it'd be stuffy, it'd be hot, it would be sweaty. And as you're sweating, your palms may get sweaty, and you don't have any gloves either. So keep those in mind. And then finally, you can use all of these to make your conclusion. And when you're making your conclusion about this, some background information. This photo is from 1908, and it was taken by a man named Louis Hine, and he was photographing for the National Child Labor Committee. And he's trying to document the terrible ways that children, or the terrible conditions that children are working in. So you can draw your conclusion out by looking at all of these and by seeing who took the photo and who he is taking it for, the purpose of the photo. So whenever you take a look at a photograph, make sure you go through these steps, scholars. Because working conditions were extremely unfair, that led to workers forming unions or coming together, all workers many times in a similar group, like all of the glass blowers or all of the mechanics or the electricians coming together. And those groups, they work together for change, to better their working conditions. But many times, the response to unions was very negative by both the government and the factory owners, because both of them took steps to prevent unions from forming. In fact, in many countries, it was illegal, it was against the law for unions to form for a number of reasons. One is that they were viewed as an economic threat. Two, they believed unions were illegal. And three, In order to get rid of unions, they would use force to end union activities. Sometimes these factory owners would hire very strong men who would go through and bully people out of unions. Also, as you can see on the picture here, this is from the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, where the striking workers right here came in contact with federal troops who actually fired upon them. So you can see here from the beginning that many governments and factory owners took steps against union activity. Unions and labor had two major ways in order to bring about change. And these different methods, one of them was through collective bargaining. And this is where union leaders would meet with the business owners and talk about how to make things better for the workers. And if collective bargaining did not work, many times then the union would go on strike, where you had a massive group of workers who refused to work. And this would actually do a great job of enacting change, because if the workers are not working in the factory, then that factory is not producing and those business owners are not making money as well. So a lot of times that could bring about a great deal of change. And you can see some of these changes in the passage of various labor reform laws. Let's focus on two different countries. One is Great Britain, and the other is the United States, and both of them passed various labor reform laws. First, with Great Britain, there's the passage of the Factory Acts that improved working conditions, and it also limited working hours as well. And workers won the right to unionize in 1870. So you can see that both their working places being better ventilated, as well as a workday being lowered in the number of hours, was taking place in Great Britain. Over to the United States, there were a number of federal agencies that were created to oversee the working conditions. And workers won the right to unionize in 1898. But it wasn't just all workers. We also had specific laws that restricted child labor over a period of time. This didn't happen overnight. It took a while for this to actually take place. First, in Britain, there were some restrictions on labor, child labor, that were enacted beginning in 1833. For example, listen to this. Oh, you could only work, if you were a child, 12 hours if you were over the age of 13. And you could only work 9 hours if you were between the ages of 9 to 12. So it's pretty incredible to even think about that taking place nowadays in the United States or Great Britain. And beginning in the 1870s, there were mandatory child education laws that further limited child labor. Back over the United States, there were different state laws that began to limit child labor in the 1840s. And in the 1870s, there was widespread compulsory school attendance laws were passed, meaning children had to go to school. There were also federal laws, but federal laws were not enacted until 1938. So you can really see how this progression between strikes as well as collective bargaining, it did take some time for various laws to take effect. Another important effect during this time period was the calls to end slavery, which is called the abolition of slavery. This only increased during the industrialization. Again, let's first focus on Great Britain, where it was mainly led by a man named William Wilberforce, who used his position in Parliament. He was a government leader to push for the ban of the British slave trade in 1807. And Britain abolished slavery throughout the British Empire in 1833. That was earlier than in the United States, because most northern states abolished slavery in 1804, but as a nation, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution prohibited slavery in 1865. So again, you can see various states abolishing slavery before Great Britain, but as a whole, as the United States as an entire country, unfortunately, we did not abolish slavery until the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865. Wonderful job, scholars. You finished the first part of the lesson. Excellent work. I'm really proud of you. Let's take a look at that lesson question. It's at the top of the screen. How did the Industrial Revolution lead to reform? Well, we've already looked at reform movements in the 1800s, and we've also looked at labor reform, also the reform movements for abolition as well. Now, let's shift our attention to various democratic reforms that took place during this time. We'll begin our discussion of democratic reforms by looking at the British Parliament, which is sort of similar to the American Congress that we have in this country. Now, in the British Parliament, there were certain people who had voting rights, but the only people who had voting rights were the 5% who were the wealthy landowners. Those are the only ones who were able to vote. So that was a problem in terms of representation, because large cities were underrepresented. Cities like Manchester, which had hundreds of thousands of people, had no votes in the parliament. Now, some of these areas that were very populated, they did have some representation, but it was not evenly apportioned at all. Some of this would change with the Reform Act of 1832, which gave voting rights to the middle class. Now, the middle class were those professionals like factory owners or doctors, accountants, people who didn't own land but did have a great deal of wealth and with that a great deal of power as well, so they demanded their ability to vote. It also granted some seats to large new cities, like what we spoke about in Manchester. But even with these reforms, again, only 10% of the population could vote with these reforms, and later reforms would grant suffrage to most adult males by 1884. Now, suffrage is the ability to vote, and this is in 1884, much later on than in the United States, which happened. The property right restrictions were ended in the 1820s. However, this was not the case for women. When we look ahead about rights for women, now women began to use their positions in the workforce to demand their rights. Some of them joined unions. Many of them had won property rights in the 1840s. So they said, if we can have property rights, why can't we have the right to vote? In addition to this, many of them formed women's suffrage organizations, and they would stage marches like this one, which took place in 1912 in New York City. You can see them calling out for votes for women. You can see that there. However, in the United States and in Britain, women would not receive the right to vote until the 1920s. And very sadly, many women in other countries around the world still do not have the right to vote. This timeline does a really good job of looking at reform during the industrialized era. And you can see a number of these reforms, like the 1832 Reform Act. British workers won the right to unionize. Slavery was abolished in the United States, compulsory education laws, and women winning the right to vote. But I really want to focus on this right here. Notice in 1848, a number of revolutions are spreading across Europe. Now, to sort of head these revolutions off, which were asking for more voting rights, for suffrage rights, and for more working rights, the British actually worked ahead of that with the Reform Act. They allowed workers to unionize, compulsory education laws. So they sort of headed off a number of these revolutions, which is why in British history during this time period, you do not read about the massive unrest that you see in the rest of Europe.